I never thought I'd find myself here, typing this out, trying to make sense of everything. You always hear stories about betrayal, but you never think it will happen to you until it does. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and got married a year after graduation. She was charming, intelligent, and had this energy that drew people in. I was lucky, or at least I thought I was. The first cracks started to show about 6 months ago. Sarah landed a new job as a marketing consultant, which required her to travel frequently. She loved it, always excited to tell me about the places she visited and the people she met. At first, I was supportive. I mean, who wouldn't be? It was her dream job. But slowly, things began to shift. She became distant. Our conversations grew shorter, her responses more clipped. She was always tired or busy. She stopped asking about my day and spent more time glued to her phone, smiling at messages she never shared with me. She'd leave the room to take calls, claiming they were work-related. I chalked it up to stress from her job. But deep down, something felt off. The turning point came one evening when she accidentally left her laptop open on the kitchen table. She was in the shower, and curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't looking to find anything incriminating, I just wanted to ease my mind. But as I clicked on her email, my heart sank. There were dozens of messages from someone named Captain Mark. At first, I thought it might be a work contact, maybe someone from her travel assignments. But the tone of the email said otherwise. I can't stop thinking about our weekend in Miami. Counting down the days until I see you again. You looked stunning in that red dress. Wish I could have kept you longer. My stomach twisted. I scrolled further, each email more painful than the last. Photos, 2 selfies of them together, hotel rooms, dinners, smiles that she no longer shared with me. She wasn't just having an affair. She was living a double life with an airplane pilot she met during her business trips. That I closed the laptop and sat in silence, my heart racing. When she came out of the shower, she acted like nothing was wrong, chatting about her day as if my world hadn't just collapsed. That I didn't confront her that night. I needed time to process, to figure out what to do next. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. The days following my discovery felt like living in a parallel universe, where everything seemed normal on the surface, but underneath, chaos brewed. I'd wake up next to Sarah, watch her go through her morning routine, sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone, acting as if she wasn't hiding an entire life from me. The same phone that buzzed with messages from Captain Mark when she thought I wasn't looking. That I couldn't unsee what I had read. Every word from those emails echoed in my mind, like background noise that refused to be silenced. But I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure, to have more than just words on a screen. Maybe it was denial, hoping there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. So, I started paying attention. Every detail mattered now. The subtle changes in her behavior weren't so subtle anymore. Her quick glances at her phone, the way she'd leave the room to take calls, the sudden work trips that popped up without warning. She'd come back from these trips distant, distracted, as if her heart was elsewhere. I found my breaking point a week later. She had another business trip scheduled, this time to Chicago. She packed light, unusually cheerful for someone claiming to attend back-to-back meetings. While she was in the shower again, ironically, the same setting where this all began, I checked her suitcase. Tucked neatly between her clothes was a small, gift-wrapped box. Curiosity, or maybe sheer desperation, got the better of me. I unwrapped it. Inside was an expensive watch with a note that read, "For my favorite captain. Can't wait to see you. Love, S." The air felt heavy, thick with betrayal. There was no room for doubt anymore. That evening, after she returned from her trip, I sat her down. My heart raced, not with fear but with the kind of adrenaline that comes when you're about to cross a point of no return. "I know about Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Her face changed instantly. For a brief second, pure shock flickered in her eyes. But then she composed herself, the mask slipping back into place. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning confusion, her voice laced with defensiveness that I didn't flinch. "The emails. The watch. The hotel reservations. Do you really want to pretend you don't know?" She scoffed, crossing her arms, her face twisting into something cold and unfamiliar. "You went through my things? That's a breach of trust." I almost laughed at the irony. "A breach of trust? I think we passed that line when you started seeing someone else," I replied sharply. She didn't deny it. "Not really." Instead, she shifted blame, her words sharp like daggers cloaked in false justifications. "You've been distant. You don't understand me anymore. Mark listens. He makes me feel alive," she spat, as if her betrayal was somehow my fault. Hearing her say that, hearing her diminish our years together into excuses for her affair, was the final nail in the coffin. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting that I stood up, the weight of the conversation both crushing and liberating. "I deserve better than this," I said quietly, walking away not just from the argument but from the illusion of the life I thought we had. Walking away from that conversation with Sarah felt like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was solid ground below. My heart wasn't just broken, it was disoriented. How do you process the fact that the person you built your life with has been living a lie right beside you? The silence in our home after that confrontation was deafening, filled with all the words we didn't say and the truth that hung between us like a ghost that I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing in particular, replaying every moment of our marriage like scenes from a movie. The vacations, the holidays, the lazy Sundays, all of it now felt tainted, like watching someone else's life. I kept asking myself, was it all fake? Did I miss the signs, or did I just choose not to see them? Sarah didn't try to talk to me that night. No apologies, no explanations. Just silence. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened, moving around the kitchen, pouring coffee, scrolling through her phone, the same routine, as if our world hadn't just imploded. That's when it hit me, she wasn't sorry. Not really. She wasn't mourning the loss of our marriage. She was mourning the inconvenience of getting caught that I packed a bag that afternoon. I didn't tell her where I was going, and she didn't ask. That told me everything I needed to know. I stayed with my friend Mike, someone I hadn't confided in much over the years because Sarah always found subtle ways to distance me from people who truly cared. It's funny how clear things become when you step outside the fog. Mike listened without interrupting, just letting me pour out everything: the emails, the confrontation, the hollow look in Sarah's eyes when I confronted her. When I finally stopped talking, he simply said, "You didn't deserve that." And that simple acknowledgement broke me in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel yet. I didn't deserve it. But there I was, trying to make sense of it anyway. Over the next few days, I oscillated between anger and sadness. One moment, I'd be furious, replaying her smug, dismissive words. The next, I'd feel this crushing wave of grief, not for her, but for the life I thought we had. That's the thing about betrayal: it doesn't just steal your trust, it steals the memories you thought were real. She texted me once, a short, emotionless message: "Let me know when you're ready to talk." As if we were discussing weekend plans, not the collapse of our marriage. That I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on something I hadn't done in years: taking care of myself. I went for long drives with no destination, rediscovered old hobbies I'd put aside for her, spent time with friends I'd unintentionally drifted from. Every day without her felt like peeling back layers of a life I'd outgrown without realizing it. But healing isn't linear. Some days were harder than others. I'd hear a song, see a place we used to visit, and the grief would sneak back in like an unwelcome guest. But each time, it stayed a little less. And that's progress. The days stretched into weeks, and with each one, I felt the fragile threads of my old life slowly unraveling. There's this illusion people cling to, that the hardest part of betrayal is the moment you discover it. But that's not true. The hardest part is what comes after. It's waking up every day, realizing that everything you thought was real has been replaced by echoes of lies and half-truths. The bed feels colder not because it's empty, but because the warmth you thought was there was never genuine to begin with. I stayed at Mike's longer than I'd planned. He never pressured me, never asked when I was going back. Maybe he knew before I did that going back wasn't an option. His place became a temporary refuge, a bubble where I could exist without pretending to be okay. But even in that space, Sarah's absence felt like a presence, one that haunted me with unanswered questions. She texted me again after a week. "Are you done ignoring me? We need to talk like adults. You're being dramatic." It wasn't that serious. That last one nearly made me laugh out loud. Not that serious. As if 8 years of marriage could be reduced to a minor inconvenience, like forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. That message was a slap in the face, not because of what she said, but because it revealed who she really was, someone incapable of acknowledging the gravity of her actions. But despite the anger, a part of me still needed answers. Not for closure, because by then, I'd realized closure wouldn't come from her, but for clarity. So, against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. We chose a neutral place, a small cafe we used to go to when we were dating. Sitting across from her felt surreal, like meeting a stranger wearing a familiar face. She looked the same, but the warmth that once filled the space between us was gone, replaced by this cold, indifferent tension. She dove right in, no small talk. "So, are you done sulking?" Her words hit like ice water, but I didn't react. I just stared at her, studying the face I used to know so well, trying to find any trace of the woman I married. She wasn't there. I asked her the only question that mattered: why? She shrugged. She shrugged. Like I'd asked her something trivial. "I don't know. It just happened. Mark was exciting. You've been so focused on work, and we grew apart. It's not like I planned it. Exciting. That's what our marriage boiled down to, a lack of excitement." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat there, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. She kept talking, offering excuses wrapped in justifications, none of which made any difference. She even had the audacity to say, "It didn't mean anything. I still love you." That's when I realized the most painful truth of all: she didn't love me. Maybe she never did. Or maybe she loved the idea of me, the stability I provided, the life we built, because it was comfortable until it wasn't. I stood up, leaving her mid-sentence. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of that cafe with no dramatic farewell, no parting words, just silence. Because sometimes silence is the loudest response you can give. The drive back to Mike's was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I kept thinking about the life I'd built with her, the memories we shared, and how easily she discarded it all. But for the first time, I wasn't sad. I was free from the lies, free from the constant doubt, free from a relationship that had died long before I found those emails. That night, I packed my things and left Mike's. Not to go back to Sarah, but to start fresh. I rented a small apartment, nothing fancy, just a space that was mine. I filled it with things I loved, things that didn't carry the weight of our past. It was the first step toward reclaiming my life, one piece at a time. Moving into my own apartment felt both liberating and terrifying. It was a small, one-bedroom space with bare white walls and creaky floorboards, nothing like the cozy, curated home Sarah and I had shared. But for the first time in months, I could breathe. There were no lingering shadows of betrayal in the corners, no echoes of arguments or fake apologies. Just silence. And that silence was both a comfort and a curse. The first few nights were the hardest. The loneliness hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just about being physically alone, it was the emotional void, the realization that the life I had built was gone. I missed the routine, the familiarity, even the illusion of security I had with Sarah. Grief doesn't just come when someone dies, it comes when dreams die, when futures you planned unravel in front of you. I kept myself busy. I unpacked boxes slowly, one at a time, deciding what to keep and what to throw away. Anything that reminded me of Sarah went straight into a donation pile. Old photos, souvenirs from trips, gifts gone. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about making space for the future, but healing isn't linear. Some days I felt strong, like I was finally getting my life back. Other days, I'd catch myself spiraling thinking about the what-ifs, replaying every moment of our marriage, wondering if there was something I missed, something I could have done differently. I knew, logically, that her choices were her own, but the emotional part of me still carried the weight of that rejection. Sarah texted me a few times, "I hope you're okay. Can we talk? I miss you." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I had nothing left to say. Her chapter in my life was over, and every message from her was just an echo from a book I'd already closed that I started therapy. It was Mike's idea, and at first, I resisted. I thought I could handle it on my own. But sitting in that sterile office, across from a stranger who didn't know me or Sarah, gave me a freedom I didn't expect. I talked about everything: the betrayal, the guilt, the anger. The therapist listened without judgment, and slowly, I began to unpack the emotional baggage I'd been carrying for years, not just from Sarah but from parts of myself I'd ignored. One day, during a session, the therapist asked me, "When was the last time you felt truly happy?" I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I realized I had been living in survival mode for so long that I'd forgotten what genuine happiness felt like. My marriage had been a comfort zone, a place where I convinced myself that routine and stability were enough. But they weren't. And maybe they never were. So, I made a list. A simple one. Things that made me happy, things I wanted to do but never did, places I wanted to visit, hobbies I'd abandoned. It felt ridiculous at first, but that list became a roadmap. I started small, going for walks, reading books I'd always meant to but never had time for, cooking meals instead of relying on takeout. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always been curious about but never pursued because Sarah thought it was a waste of time. And with each new experience, each small victory, I felt a piece of myself returning. Not the old me, the one who ignored red flags and settled for less than I deserved, but a new version of me, shaped by pain but not defined by it. One day, while walking through a park, I saw a couple laughing together, their hands intertwined, their faces lit with genuine joy. I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel envy. I felt hope, hope that love isn't always betrayal masked as affection, hope that there's life after heartbreak, hope that even shattered hearts can be rebuilt, stronger than before. Time has a strange way of healing wounds, not by erasing the pain, but by dulling its edges, making it less sharp, less consuming. It had been a few months since I moved into my own place, and life was starting to feel bearable. Not perfect, not whole, but manageable. The crushing weight on my chest was lighter, the silence in my apartment no longer deafening. It was progress, even if it didn't always feel like it. One day, while scrolling aimlessly through my phone, I came across an old photo: Sarah and me, laughing at some friend's wedding. Our smiles looked genuine, but staring at it, I couldn't help but wonder if that moment had been real or just another illusion. Instead of spiraling into what-ifs, I did something different. I deleted it. No hesitation, no ceremony. Just, gone. And it felt good. Liberating, even. Like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. That small act became a turning point. I started decluttering not just my phone, but my life. Old keepsakes, emails, even playlists that reminded me of her. All of it went. I wasn't erasing the past, I was choosing not to be chained to it. My life was more than the wreckage she left behind. Around this time, I decided to take a solo trip, a weekend getaway to a small coastal town I'd always wanted to visit but never did because Sarah thought it was too boring. The irony wasn't lost on me. I packed light, booked a modest cabin near the beach, and hit the road with no real plan except to breathe, to exist without the shadow of my old life hanging over me. The first day was harder than I expected. Being alone, truly alone, forces you to sit with your thoughts, and mine weren't always kind. But by the second day, something shifted. I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the shore, sunlight pouring through the window, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. No texts to answer, no lies to uncover, just me, the ocean, and the realization that I was okay. While exploring a small bookstore in town, I met someone. Her name was Emily. It wasn't some movie-style, love at first sight moment. It was casual, organic. We reached for the same book, laughed about it, and ended up talking over coffee. She was kind, easy to talk to, with no pretense or hidden agenda. Just a person, living her life, crossing paths with mine. We talked about everything except the past, no need to rehash old wounds. It wasn't about romance, it was about connection. A reminder that not every interaction had to be heavy with history or burdened by expectations. Sometimes, people come into your life simply to remind you that it's still worth living fully. When I left that town, I didn't leave with a new relationship or some profound, life-changing revelation. But I left with something better: hope that I could rebuild, hope that not all connections lead to heartbreak, hope that life, in its simplest moments, could still be beautiful. Back home, I found myself smiling more genuine, unforced smiles. I reconnected with old friends, picked up new hobbies, and slowly, piece by piece, rebuilt a life that felt authentic. Not a life defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was creating. Sarah texted again, weeks later. Just a simple, "Hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without replying. Not out of anger, not out of spite. But because her chapter in my story was over. It's strange how life keeps moving, even when you feel like you're standing still. But at some point, without realizing it, you start moving with it. That's what happened to me. The days blended into weeks, and the sharp edges of heartbreak softened into faint outlines, like scars that no longer hurt when you touch them. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. I didn't realize how far I'd come until one ordinary morning. I woke up, made coffee, opened the window to let in the cool breeze, and something hit me. I felt peaceful. No heaviness in my chest. No lingering ache in the pit of my stomach. Just peace. It wasn't tied to any specific event or person. It was just there, quietly waiting for me to notice. That's when I truly understood something: moving on isn't a moment. It's a million small decisions you make every day without realizing it. It's choosing not to dwell on the past when a song comes on. It's walking past a place filled with old memories and feeling nothing but indifference. It's deleting a message without hesitation because you've finally accepted that some people don't deserve a reply. One of the biggest shifts in my healing journey was realizing how much of myself I'd lost in my marriage, not because Sarah took it from me, but because I'd given it away piece by piece, trying to keep things together. I'd compromised on dreams, hobbies, even friendships, all in the name of us. But there was no us. There was just me, slowly disappearing behind the illusion of a happy marriage. So, I started reclaiming those parts of myself. I signed up for a photography class, something I'd always wanted to do but never found the right time for. I reconnected with friends I'd unintentionally drifted from, realizing how much I'd missed genuine conversations without hidden tensions. I traveled not to escape, but to explore, to remind myself that the world was bigger than the pain I'd carried. Every new experience felt like adding color to a life that had been stuck in grayscale. Months after that trip to the coastal town, I ran into Emily again. Completely random. We were both at a local farmer's market, laughing about the chaos of juggling coffee cups and grocery bags. It felt easy, like we were just picking up from where we left off, even though we hadn't planned it. We grabbed coffee, sat on a park bench, and talked about everything: travel, books, life. But what struck me most wasn't the conversation itself. It was how I felt. Present. No ghosts from the past whispering doubts in my ear. No comparisons. No fear of being hurt again. Just me, enjoying the moment for what it was. Emily wasn't a replacement for Sarah. She wasn't some magical cure for heartbreak. She was a reminder that connections don't have to be complicated. They don't have to be built on grand gestures or dramatic stories. Sometimes, they're just simple, genuine, and real. We exchanged numbers not with the weight of expectations, but with the lightness of possibility. One night, back in my apartment, I found an old notebook from years ago, filled with random thoughts, goals, and dreams. Flipping through it, I stumbled upon something I'd written long before I met Sarah. I hope I never settle for less than I deserve. Reading those words, I felt a lump in my throat, not from sadness, but from pride. Because despite everything, I didn't settle. I thought I had when I married Sarah, but leaving, healing, growing, that was me honoring those words, even if it took me longer than I'd planned. That I don't hate Sarah. I don't wish her harm. If anything, I'm grateful, not for the betrayal, but for the lessons it taught me, that heartbreak isn't the end of the story, that losing someone who doesn't value you is actually a win, that self-love isn't just a cliché, it's the foundation for everything else. That I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where things with Emily will go, and for once, I'm okay with not knowing. Because life isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and being brave enough to live without them sometimes. What I do know is this: I'm happy. Not because I found someone new, but because I found myself. Starting over sounds like such a clean concept, like you flip a switch, close one chapter, and open another with crisp, fresh pages. But in reality, starting over isn't neat. It's messy. It's scribbling in the margins of a life you thought you had figured out, erasing lines that were once bold, and realizing some stains never fully fade, but that's okay. Life isn't supposed to be tidy. The more time passed, the more I realized that letting go isn't just about moving on from someone else, it's about moving on from who you were with them. And that was the hardest part. Not forgetting Sarah, not even forgiving her, but shedding the version of myself who thought her love defined my worth. Emily and I started spending more time together. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. There were no grand declarations, no cinematic moments of passion. It was simpler than that: coffee dates, long walks, conversations that didn't feel forced. It felt easy, not because it was perfect, but because I wasn't carrying the same weight I used to. One evening, we sat on a park bench watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink, and the air was filled with that soft, golden glow you only get right before dusk. She turned to me and asked, "Are you happy?" It was such a simple question, but it caught me off guard. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I realized I hadn't asked myself that in a long time. I thought about everything: the betrayal, the heartbreak, the nights spent questioning my worth. But none of that felt heavy anymore. Instead, I felt light, like I'd been carrying a backpack filled with stones and finally decided to put it down. I said, and for the first time, I truly meant it. That I used to think my story was defined by what happened to me, by Sarah's choices, by the way she left me standing in the ruins of our marriage. But I was wrong. My story isn't about her. It's about me. It's about how I picked up the pieces, how I learned to sit with my pain without letting it consume me, how I stopped waiting for someone else to save me and realized I could save myself. I started journaling again, not to document the pain, but to celebrate the growth. Every entry was a reminder that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering differently. I didn't need to erase the past. I just needed to change the way I looked at it. That I didn't expect to see Sarah again. But life, as always, has a sense of humor. I ran into her at a grocery store, of all places. She was standing in the produce aisle, comparing apples, looking as ordinary as ever. My heart didn't race. My stomach didn't twist. I just felt nothing. She noticed me and gave a small, awkward smile. We exchanged polite nods, the kind you give to someone you used to know but don't anymore. She approached me. "Hey," she said, as if we were old friends catching up after years apart. "Hey," I replied, my voice steady. There was a pause. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I didn't give her the space to. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. Whatever words she had wouldn't change anything. They wouldn't undo the betrayal, the lies, or the lessons I'd learned since. So, I gave her one last smile, not forced, not bitter. Just a genuine, peaceful smile, and I walked away, and that was it. No dramatic confrontation. No closure-seeking conversation. Just an ending. If you've made it this far, reading my story, here's what I hope you take away: healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel invincible, and others, you'll feel like you're drowning. Both are part of the process. You are not what happened to you. You're the person you choose to become because of it. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from the grip of what no longer serves you. Happiness isn't found in someone else. It's found in the quiet moments when you realize you're enough, all on your own. I don't think about Sarah often. When I do, it's not with anger or regret. It's with a kind of distant gratitude. Not for what she did, but for what it taught me. I've built a life that feels authentic. I laugh more, love deeper, and live fully, not despite what happened, but because of how I grew through it. Emily is still in my life. We're figuring things out, slowly and honestly. But whether it lasts or not isn't the point. The point is, I'm whole. Not because someone put me back together, but because I did. It's funny how life feels like it moves in circles sometimes. You think you've reached the end of something, a relationship, a chapter, a version of yourself, and then, without realizing it, you find yourself back at the beginning. But not the same beginning. A new one. One you approach with different eyes, shaped by lessons you never asked for but desperately needed. I've been reflecting on that a lot lately. Not because I'm stuck in the past, but because the past finally feels like just that, the past. It's no longer a shadow trailing behind me. It's just a collection of memories, some good, some bad, none of them holding the power they once did. One of the biggest surprises in this journey was realizing how much joy I'd been missing, not because Sarah took it from me, but because I'd stopped looking for it. I was so wrapped up in maintaining an image of a perfect life that I forgot to actually live it. But now? Joy finds me in the simplest places. It's in the quiet mornings, sipping coffee while the world is still asleep. It's in spontaneous road trips with no destination, windows down, music blaring. It's in deep conversations with friends, the kind that stretch into the early hours without you noticing, and sometimes, it's just in the silence, peaceful, not lonely. Emily and I are still seeing each other. It's different from any relationship I've had before. There's no pressure to define things, no underlying fear of losing her, because I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. She's not here to fill a void. I don't have one anymore. And that's the most freeing realization of all. I didn't expect to see Sarah again after that brief grocery store run-in. But life had other plans. A mutual friend from college got married recently, and we both ended up at the same wedding. There she was, dressed elegantly, surrounded by people, her laughter filling the room. A few years ago, that would have crushed me. Now? It was just background noise. We exchanged polite smiles, a nod of acknowledgement, but no words. There was nothing left to say. I watched her for a moment, not out of longing, but out of curiosity. And I realized something powerful: she wasn't the villain in my story. She was just a person who made choices that hurt me, yes, but also choices that pushed me to grow in ways I never would have otherwise. That realization didn't come with a dramatic epiphany. It came quietly, like the final puzzle piece sliding into place. People often talk about heartbreak like it's this singular, devastating event. But the real heartbreak isn't the moment it happens, it's the slow unraveling afterward. The empty bed. The lingering texts. The echoes of laughter in rooms that now feel too big. But here's the thing: heartbreak doesn't just break you. It rebuilds you. It strips away everything you thought you needed until all that's left is you, raw, vulnerable, but real. And from there, you get to choose. You get to decide who you become. I chose resilience. I chose to forgive, not for Sarah's sake, but for mine. I chose to love again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I chose to live fully, even when it scared me. If you've made it this far, reading my story, here's what I hope you take with you: you're stronger than you think. Even when it feels like you're drowning, you're still breathing. Pain isn't permanent. It feels like it is, but it's not. It fades, shifts, and eventually becomes just another part of your story. You deserve more than survival. You deserve to thrive, to find joy, to create new memories that aren't tainted by the past. Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without the weight that I'm not the same person who started this story. I'm not the man who sat in the dark, staring at a phone filled with texts that shattered his world. That man was lost. Broken. But he also laid the foundation for the person I am today, and I like who I've become, not because I'm perfect. Not because I have it all figured out, but because I'm whole on my own terms. Reaching this part of my story feels surreal, like standing at the top of a hill and looking back at the winding path that got me here. There were steep climbs, unexpected detours, and moments when I didn't think I'd make it. But somehow, I did. And standing here now, I realize that the view is worth every step. Life after heartbreak isn't marked by grand milestones. There's no finish line where someone hands you a medal and declares, "Congratulations, you've healed." It's quieter than that. Healing sneaks up on you in the most ordinary moments. It's waking up one day and realizing you didn't think about the pain. It's laughing, genuinely laughing without that lingering shadow in the back of your mind. It's walking past familiar places, hearing old songs, and feeling nothing but a distant acknowledgement that that's what real healing looks like. Not forgetting, but remembering without hurting. When I started this journey, I thought the goal was to move on. But now, I understand that moving on isn't the destination, it's the process. It's the choices you make every day, the way you pick yourself up after each setback, the way you keep going even when it feels pointless. Here's what I've learned: you are not your heartbreak. The pain may shape you, but it doesn't define you. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. I thought forgiving Sarah would be impossible, but holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting her to suffer. Letting go wasn't for her, it was for me. Happiness isn't something you find in other people. It's something you create within yourself. Relationships can add to it, but they should never be the source. It's okay to start over. In fact, it's necessary. Growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. The most important relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. Nurture it. Protect it. Prioritize it. Emily and I are still in each other's lives, but not in the way people expect. We're friends, companions who crossed paths at the right time, not because we were meant to complete each other, but because we helped each other find our way. There's beauty in that simplicity, no pressure, no expectations, just genuine connection. I've built a life that feels authentic. I wake up excited for the day, even if it's just for small things: a good cup of coffee, a walk in the park, a new book to dive into. I've reconnected with family, old friends, and most importantly, with myself. I've found joy in solitude, peace in silence, and purpose in the present moment. A few weeks ago, I stumbled upon an old box while cleaning out my closet. Inside were relics from my past: photos, letters, souvenirs from trips Sarah and I took. For a moment, I felt that familiar pang, but it wasn't pain. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons. For the growth. For the journey. I didn't keep the box. I didn't need to. The memories were already a part of me, etched into my story, but no longer controlling it. If you're in the thick of heartbreak, feeling like the pain will never end, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me: it gets better. Not overnight. Not all at once. But slowly, quietly, it gets better. You'll find pieces of yourself you thought were lost. You'll laugh again harder than you ever did before. You'll look back and realize that what felt like the end was really just the beginning. You are stronger than you think, you are worth more than someone's inability to love you properly, and your story isn't over. It's just getting started. So, this is it. The final chapter of a story I never wanted to write, but one I'm proud of. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Because through every heartbreak, every tear, every late-night reflection, I found my way back to myself, and in the end, that's the greatest love story of all. Looking back, I realize my story was never really about Sarah. It was about me, about losing myself, finding my way through the wreckage, and learning that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about growing. I'm not defined by the betrayal, the heartbreak, or the mistakes. I'm defined by how I stood back up, even when it felt impossible. I've found peace not in the absence of pain, but in the understanding that pain was part of the journey. So, here I am whole, not because someone else fixed me, but because I rebuilt myself, and that's the real ending. Or maybe, it's just the beginning.